Capturing the perfect Milky Way or nighttime landscape can be a huge challenge. So in this video, we've prepped a 5-step guide to walk you through the entire process. What's up friends, my name is Pi, welcome to SLR Lounge. So for this video, I'm teaming up with our in-house landscape and astrophotography guru, Matthew Seville, to bring you this 5-step guide, which we're gonna dive straight in. Let's talk first about the gear. So number one, when it comes to astro landscapes, nighttime landscape photography, you're gonna want a wide angle lens that's also fast. So we're talking, let's say 24mm or wider, and we're talking a lens that can open up to at least a minimum of an f2.8 aperture, ideally f2, f1.4, faster the better. And when I say faster, I'm simply saying this lens will allow more light in. There are plenty of lenses that match this criteria, and if you already have a wide angle lens, ideally a prime that can shoot at f2.8 or better, you're good to go. If you don't and you're looking for a good place to start, I'd recommend Samyang/Rokinon lenses. They offer really good lenses at a great price point. For example, the 24mm f1.8 lens is lightweight, compact, easy to use, good image quality, and it comes in at $500 new, so it's also quite affordable. If you want to go a bit wider, you can jump to the 18mm, available in both Samyang and Rokinon brands. This is going to be an f2.8 lens, so not quite as fast, but again, still a great lens. I believe this one's available for Sony full frame. The crop sensor equivalent is brand new and it's at 12mm and f2, which makes it another fantastic option. And last but not least, in that same Samyang Rokinon lineup, we have the 14mm f2.8, which is available for various mounts and cameras. Either way, start with the right lens. You want to go 24mm or wider, f2.8 or better when it comes to the aperture. Step 2, you're going to need a sturdy, and I would also add portable tripod. Reason being, we're shooting at night, we're gonna be dragging out the shutter. There is no way to do this handheld. You can place your camera on rocks and whatnot, but really to get the compositions that you're gonna want, you need to have a tripod. You want the tripod to be sturdy, but we also need it to be portable because most of the time we're gonna be hiking into these locations. We wanna find spots that have very little light pollution, and that requires a bit of a walk, and carrying around, let's say, a large tripod with a fluid video head, all that kind of stuff is going to get very cumbersome and difficult. So we want sturdy, but also portable. And so far on that side, my favorite option is still the Peak Design travel tripod, which comes in both aluminum and carbon fiber variants depending on your budget. Keep in mind that I dig this tripod. It folds down to a very compact size. It's really well made for its size. It's very sturdy. It's all the things that you'd want. My only issue with it though is that the head itself is a little bit annoying when it comes to flipping it to the portrait aspect ratio. Because of its design and how compact it folds up, the head kind of acts weird when you put it onto the side. I have to kind of move the legs around just to get it to kind of sit so I can shoot portrait aspect. You can do it, it's just going to be a bit annoying. This shouldn't be that big of an issue when it comes to landscape and astrophotography because probably the majority of your shots are going to be landscape aspect ratio anyway, and there's not going to be any issues. But do understand that there's a little bit of a annoyance on that side. That being said, you can look up any tripod that you like. What I would do is kind of balance out that sturdy tripod with the portability factor as you're looking. Once you set up your tripod, do make sure that the legs are fully locked before you place your camera. The other thing, you want to make sure that that head is tightened down, and if there's a breeze, don't step away from the camera. It can tip over, especially if the base isn't that wide. Okay, so step 3, scout your location before it gets dark. As I mentioned, you're going to want to find locations that have no light pollution. This is when your stars are going to shine best. This is when there's not going to be blown out landscapes. And to find these locations, not only are you going to be kind of trekking out into these spots, but a location without light pollution is going to be inherently very dark when the sun goes down, which means setting up the perfect angle, getting the tripod and camera up and ready, all that stuff is difficult once the sun sets. It's not impossible, but you're gonna be using a flashlight. And two, please be prepared when you go on these shoots. Have your water, your food, your flashlight, all that kind of stuff. Have spares on everything so that you're ready in case of anything that might happen. Granted, this isn't to say that you can't set up more shots after the sun goes down. We just find it easier to do so while the sun is up. Take a seat, have some fun shooting the sunset, and be ready for your shots as night comes. One thing that helps us as well are apps on the phone. There are several different apps that'll help you actually map out locations and specifically where stars and constellations are going to be. One of those is Sunseeker as well as PhotoPills. These apps will let you kind of get the perfect angle and understand which direction you're going to be shooting at whatever time of year and whatever location you're shooting at. Step 4. Dialing in the right exposure. Now this part is tricky, and honestly when it comes to nightscapes, I want you to forget all the simple exposure kind of rules of thumb or general kind of ideas like exposing to the left or exposing to the right. Really, when it comes to a nightscape, the goal is capture all of the information possible, and your best friend in this process is going to be a histogram. What you want to do is make sure that the histogram contains all the information. Just shoot for the middle. Try and get all of the information in the middle of your histogram, ensuring that you don't overexpose the stars. If you overexpose the stars, they tend to go white and you're going to lose color in them. So the shot might look okay from the back of the camera, but once you get it onto the computer, you'll notice that you've lost color in the stars. So middle of the road exposure, histogram is your best friend. Make sure you have that nice little shape that captures all the info right in the center of the histogram. Do remember that when it comes to nightscapes, you're going to be bumping up the ISO quite a bit. 1600 ISO, 3200 ISO, 6400 ISO. These are typical settings, which means that, well, most modern cameras can handle this no problem, but it means that your dynamic range is going to be reduced. So the exposure becomes that much more critical because unlike a shot during the day, where if it's underexposed, you can kind of pull out the foreground, the shadows, you can't really do that when it comes to these nightscapes. Your exposure needs to be right. You need to make sure that you have the details in the shadow of the landscape, as well as the details in the stars. Before we move on from exposure, let me give you all some good starting points and remind you all about star trails. So for shutter speed, think between 4 and 30 seconds as a good starting point. When it comes to aperture, you're thinking wide open on whatever lens you got. So ideally f2.8 or better. We're talking f2 if you have a lens that can support it, f1.4, just wide open. Then ISO is going to be that last number that we're going to dial in. We're typically going to be in ranges of 1600 to 6400 ISO. Now what I want you guys to keep in mind is star trails. So look, anytime you start letting your shutter speed extend out to 20 seconds, 30 seconds and beyond, you're gonna see movement in the stars, and this creates star trails. Now, if you're aiming to create star trails, then obviously this is something that you want and you shouldn't be worried about it. But if you want a sharp nighttime sky, you want the star detail and you don't want movement around them, then we need to think of some other basic rules, one of which is just the 500 rule. So all you're gonna do is take 500, divide it by your focal length, and that gives you kind of the maximum shutter speed that you're gonna go to not get star trails. So for example, if you are taking the 500 rule and you're using a 24mm lens, 500 divided by 24 is roughly gonna be around 20 seconds-ish. And so that's your range to not get star trails. If you're gonna really blow this thing up, so on Instagram, the 500 rule is great, right? Because you're not gonna really zoom in detail. But if we're talking a high megapixel image, you wanna be able to zoom in, see crisp detail, you wanna be able to blow it up, all of that, then a better rule would be the 250 rule. So you take that same rule, go 250 divided by your focal length. Once again, if you do 250 divided by 24mm, that gives you roughly 10 seconds. This is an even better place to start if you want to ensure that you're not gonna have any star trails whatsoever. Keep in mind, it requires a bump in ISO. Last thing along this exposure line is please, please, please do not use your live view to gauge exposure. Histogram is your best friend. Your live view is gonna throw you off because of, again, the fact that you're shooting at nighttime. Everything's gonna always look brighter than it actually is when you're in pitch black environments. Don't use live view or any other metric other than the histogram to get to your exposure. Last but not least, step 5 is to set your focus. For this, I would highly recommend that you just flip your lens into manual focus. You can use focus lock features on the camera, but the thing is, I always find it very easy to accidentally hit something and change that focus while I'm in the process of shooting. So instead of worrying about that, switch over to manual focus. Don't just set your focus to infinity and leave it. We're shooting wide open, and generally that infinity has a range to it. So what I want you to do is set the lens to infinity and then go to the live view and zoom in on kind of a grouping of stars or a single star roughly around the center of the frame. You don't need to go out to the edges. In fact, I want you to avoid going out to the edges. It can be anywhere in the rough middle of the image, but zoom in as much as you can and then adjust the focus manually to make sure that star or group of stars is tack sharp. From there, you're good to go because you've set it to manual focus. It's not going to change on you. You're not going to bump anything, and you're fine. Now, a bonus feature on that Samyang 24 f1.8 lens is that for astrophotography, there's actually a green light that will illuminate when you hit that perfect infinity focus range. This makes it very handy when it comes to this type of photography. That green light is also a setting that you can adjust and fine tune, and it's going to remember it in the lens optics itself. Now, final little bonus tip, when you're ready to actually shoot, use a shutter release, and if you don't want to carry one with you, just use the 2-second timer. So that way when you press the shutter, the 2-second timer counts down, and then it goes ahead and takes the shot without you touching the camera as you're shooting. This will ensure that you're not going to create any camera shake when you press the shutter release button. All right, my friends, that is it for this video. Matt and I hope y'all enjoyed. If you did, you know what to do. You know what to do to help us here on YouTube. In the meantime, we're gonna link up all the gear that we used in the description of this video, so be sure to check that out as well. Leave us a comment, let us know what you'd like to learn about next, and we'll see you all in the next video. Peace.